Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Fear. It can stop us from achieving and make us feel miserable. It seems that almost all of us must face it at one time or another, but we don't know if we will win or if fear will overtake us. Can we conquer it, or will it defeat us? Well, don't panic, because Scott and I have some great tips on overcoming fear and other great ideas on episode 496 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
That's a great opening, Bill. I feel like we did this topic around Halloween. Didn't we do a fear topic?
Did we do a fear? Well, fear's a big deal.
We missed it. We missed it. But This is very applicable any time of the year. I think salespeople deal with fear. And I think it's going to be an interesting topic to discuss. But we're going to do our book study first, The Sales Jiu-Jitsu. We're on part 3, Winning, chapter 9. And this is the second to the last chapter. So we're going to be finishing this up next week. So what are some things you took away from this chapter, Bill?
Well, I really liked the cost of inaction. So the first step is show you're serious. And we're very good at talking about return on investment, but he talks about COI. Yeah. And that's cost of inaction. And I think that's a really good closing tool. You've got to make them think about what's going to happen if you don't do something about this. And most of the sales that go bad, they don't say, no, I hate you and I never want to see you again. They just say, we'll think about it, and that stalls. So the cost of inaction can help with a stall, with I need to talk to other people, with we need to think about it. All the vague stalls that get you calling them 27 times later going, well, did you think about it? Well, how's it going? Well, how's it? Just checking in,
Yeah, just checking in, just touching base. Don't you love that one? And it's just ironic. They talk about this in the chapter, and I think the next section is how people make decisions emotionally. And when people say that I want to think about it, it's not an intellectual exercise. It's really an emotional feeling that they're struggling with. And I just went through this recently when I was pitched from the company that hosts my website to do a facelift. And they gave me this dollar amount, this range. And I'm like, that seems like a lot of money for a facelift. And it didn't look like they were really doing that much for the amount of money that they were charging me. And it was an emotional feeling. I go, it's got a hunch, but it's also the cost of inaction. What is the cost of inaction of not, creating a facelift for your website? I don't know. I can't really put it in a dollar amount. So it had no influence, and the salesperson didn't include it in the conversation. So I wasn't convinced to invest the money because the cost of inaction was not great enough. So I felt that.
But two things, right? Cost of inaction, but also a feeling that I'm not getting enough value here. And so the other problem the salesperson had is they hadn't convinced you or shown you that whatever this cost was, it was worth it.
Right. Yeah.
You were going to get more. As you said, I looked at this facelift and that seemed like a lot of money for a facelift. And so they didn't, if there were other things going on, he didn't explain those, or the salesperson didn't explain it. So you've got to make these things clear to people. Yeah. Too often we assume, and of course, if you've ever taken the word assume apart, it makes an ass out of you and me. So
right. Yeah, that's so true. That is very true. And that's one of the things that prospects, are upset by salespeople. Salespeople assume things. And I never said that it was too much. I never said that I want to think about it. I said, from what you're telling me and the price that you're giving me, I just don't feel like there's enough value there. So what am I missing that you have not included?
Boy, talk about a door opening for that person, right?
Yeah, right. I gave it to them. I don't want to be paying hardball with them. They're a great company and they've done a great job for me over the last 10 years. I mean, I've built my business off my website. You type in sales training, MN, I'm number 1. I'm grateful for that. So I can't complain, but it's just for the amount of money.
Sounds like you're complaining when you're not complaining.
It's for a particular decision. This decision, I'm not complaining. But
all right.
Anyway.
So that's the show you're serious. What's the next one? Because there's always 3 of them.
There are always 3. Yeah.
Always 3.
The professional's burden is the next one. And it really talks about, salespeople often sell how they buy. And I've said this hundreds of times. How we sell is how we buy. Is that how all prospects buy? No. Prospects buy for their reasons, not ours. I love the quote by Blaise Pascal. People are more convinced by reasons they discover than ones told to them by others.
Or, as I've heard, people convinced against their will are of the same opinion still.
Yes.
So if you do all your logic and throw it all at them and convince them, they still might say, I got to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's when they say 85% of people make their decisions based on a gut feeling, I think they're absolutely right. Emotions play have a tremendous impact when it comes to making a decisions. And we all have heard of saying, people buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually. I've said that 1,000 times, I think.
No, I think you've said it more than 1,000.
Yeah, I probably
maybe
have.
Just on the podcast.
I don't know that I've talked that many people in my life, but I'll get there. I'm sure.
When you say it once to a group of 10, is that you said it 10 times, or have you just said it once?
Well, I guess I'm not counting impressions or cost per thousand on that.
Advertising.
Yeah, exactly.
So I like that this professional burden says you need to address the emotional side. The cost of inaction, the return on investment, those are intellectual arguments. But at some point, you have to get them beyond I call it getting beyond the decision to enjoying the use of it. Scott, I need to move you forward. Here's what your site's going to look like, and here's what it's going to do for you. Are you excited about getting to that point with your potential customers? If they can't move you forward beyond the yes or no, then you can't get into the imagination and make that emotional decision.
Right. Yeah. And it tells a great story in this chapter about what kind of legacy this particular teacher wants to leave behind. And he really knew how to play at the heartstrings with this story. And he got right to the emotion and was obviously able to convince this person to move forward. And a great example, a great story in that section.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's the story selling helps us to allow people to imagine a different world than the one that they're thinking of.
Yeah. The next section is titled Cement, which I think is appropriate. It's the buyer remorse.
Yeah.
And really getting the elite salesperson cements a yes to a permanent yes, and really makes the prospect excited about making the decision. And they can now they cannot imagine not having the outcome, not having the solution, not having the results that the product or service is going to provide. And as they mentioned earlier about that visioning and that imagination and the future casting, I think is what they called it. Here's where they're really solidifying the future casting is to now you've said yes, now you can envision it because it's about to be delivered.
And I think what was really interesting, and I had never thought of this before. So in 40 years of selling, I really liked this section because it gave me a totally new idea. Now, I've written thank you notes before, and I think that's good. But what they're talking about is have some kind of an event, have some kind of a kickoff party, have something that says, this is now happening. When you buy a car, they have a special day for you to come in and learn about your car with other people who have bought the car. It's really cementing that in to say, you're special. This is a special event. This is something that happened. Even if it's just taking the client out for dinner and saying, let's celebrate this great decision and our opportunity to work together. I think all those things say now we're past the decision and we're in action, and it doesn't give them the time to have that remorse.
Right. Yeah, great move. I've heard of real estate agents after the house is sold and the new buyers move in, the real estate agent will have a garage party or a backyard barbecue, and they'll invite all the neighbors over to meet the new buyers and the new neighbors. Now they're new neighbors, and to be able to bring everybody together. And it's a great move for the real estate agent because then the real estate agent gets more business from the neighbors.
Right.
And here's how I work with buyers, and here's what I do for them to make them feel comfortable in their new neighborhood.
Just having the party says I'm different from other real estate agents. Yeah. I'm doing something special. And I think that's a great move.
Yeah. So I love that technique, and very, very, very few do it. I mean, it's just like the thank you notes. How many thank you notes do you get in the mail? I might get 5 a year, if that. And I love them, and I save them, and they always have an impression, especially when I get a business card these days. I mean, when was the last time you got a business card? We don't meet in person anymore, so we don't get business cards.
Right. I got a big box of them though.
Yeah. So do I. I got to give them away.
I think this is a great chapter. We're on one more chapter in the book about learning, I think, but our next book is going to be The Success Principles by Jack Canfield.
Yeah.
And this is packed. Scott and I haven't really figured out how we're going to do this. It's got about 65 principles in it.
Right.
I think what we might do, Scott, is like read 5 of them and pick a couple of them that we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
One that you like, one that I like, and we'll focus. I don't think we can hit all 65 of them.
No, but
I don't want to go 2 years on this.
Right. It's true. Hopefully we'll retain our listeners during it, but there's a lot of options in that book. And it also could be a combination, because we seem to do a topic in a book, and there's a lot of topics within this book. It could be just, the whole episode too, but we'll figure it out. And I'm grateful for feedback from our listeners on what they would like to see or hear in the show, and how we can continue to deliver the relevant information for today's marketplace and today's challenges that salespeople are struggling with. So we always welcome your feedback. So go to winningatselling.com and give that to us.
Yeah. And the Success Principles by Jack Canfield, pick that up so you can read along with us. And then the book giveaway is done. And so we ran out of books, so we don't have any winners this week. And we just really appreciate Daniel and Elliot, who gave us 20 books to give out, and we gave them all out. So that was kind of exciting. Yeah, very generous of them, and an enjoyable book. One more week in it. So pick up The Success Principles by Jack Canfield and finish off with this great book, Sales Jiu-Jitsu. See that, Scott? Say sales.
Yeah, Sales Jiu-Jitsu. I've got
you got it. You got it after 10 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a slow learner as an adult. I need the incremental growth reinforced over time as the adult model learning, system. So
there you go.
Yeah. This segment is being brought to you by The Art of Prospecting, your guide to get in the door, by Steve Kloida.
I'm Ron Lehman, and I want to tell you about one of the best sales books I've ever read. The Art of Prospecting, your guide to get in the door, gives you the tools and techniques to fill your pipeline and achieve more sales success. The author is Steve Kloida, known as the prospecting expert, and this book proves it. So if you want to learn from the master, get The Art of Prospecting, your guide to get in the door. It's available at theprospectingexpert.com. Just click on the Buy Book button.
Well, topic today, overcoming fear. And I tell you, we probably all felt the grip of fear on us at one time or another. Maybe it was a physical fear, maybe standing. I'm a swimmer and a diver, and standing at the end of that high dive, that 10-meter platform or whatever it is, that's a big deal. Maybe it's that first driving lesson with your dad.
Oh my!
in our old Impala. 3 on the tree, I think it was, trying to learn a stick shift with my dad. That was a pleasant thing as the car humped its way down the road, because you couldn't figure out how to let the clutch out right and put the gas down. Maybe it was more of a mental fear. I have a friend of mine whose his daughter just hates taking tests. So maybe back in high school when you had to take that ACT or the SAT test so you could get into college, or for those salespeople picking up the phone to make a call, maybe an uncomfortable call, that might be that fear factor for you. But it's different from all of us. But don't make any mistake, it feels absolutely real. It's an emotional issue, but it feels real. You sweat, your palms sweat, you get jittery, your knees may knock. I've taught people to speak for years, and public speaking is one of the greatest fears of people. So how do we conquer these fears? How do we overcome them? Because they can stop us from having the success that we want. So we want to talk about, how do you overcome fears? How do you move forward? And no matter what your field is, you're going to be able to do it. Now, most of our listeners in sales. So Scott, what are some of the fears that you've seen salespeople had to deal with?
I think some of the conceptual beliefs and fears that they struggle with is obviously talking to strangers and talking to people that they don't know, and also following some previous sales techniques that they've been taught that are maybe no longer relevant, or they've been misunderstood and they're not really being applied as to what the intent of the sales skill has been taught by somebody that is delivering lessons. But obviously the fear of talking to strangers is one of them. And I think that starts there, and then
I think that's worse now than when we grew up. I think that we were not. I think this "don't talk to strangers" is hammered into young people's heads now. And, be careful. Don't meet strangers. Don't talk to people. You and I, we grew up in a time where we were running wild in the neighborhood. And now a kid can't go out to play without his parent looking over his shoulder. And so, every kid's going to get kidnapped off the street. So don't talk to strangers. Don't take candy. It's all those things.
I never saw a bicycle helmet until I was in my 40s, I think, or 30s. But when I was 15 and 16, I was playing chicken with my neighbors, on asphalt on our bikes, and there was no helmets.
No.
I had an old bike.
The only time I broke a bone as a kid was I had an old bike with one of those front baskets.
Yeah.
And the bar going down to the wheel axle let loose and went into the wheel. And I stopped short and went head over heels over that bike,
right,
and broke my collarbone. I was lucky I didn't smash my head against the concrete. So I believe in bike helmets. We can advance, but we can also put fears into our kids that keep them from succeeding.
Yeah,
and I think some of those fears are in there. I think that fear of picking up the phone, not knowing what somebody will say, afraid of being yelled at by somebody. I think just taking a no. People don't like to hear the word no. I think they're afraid of taking a no. I'm not interested. And I think we talked about this through the last week or the week before. Because I offer you ketchup, it's not like, no, I don't want your ketchup and your big fat ugly hog. It's no, I don't want your ketchup. And it's like, okay, I got to if I make 50 phone calls, maybe I won't worry about it so much. It's the thought about it. It's the anticipation about it. I think that's really hard for people. They sit around thinking, I got to make 20 phone calls today. I got to pick up the phone and do it, man. So let's go into what are some of the ways to overcome fear. I've got some pretty practical ways. One other thing I think you need to do is practice a lot. This is something that Daniel Moskowitz in Sales Jiu-Jitsu talks about a lot. He has a safe environment for his salespeople where they can try new things, go over it, and practice. Doing something for the first time in front of a client is a recipe for disaster. So practice until you get good enough, whether it's at phone calling or having an appointment or overcoming objections, that you're better at it. So whatever those things you fear, those are the things you need to spend a little bit more time practicing so you can feel you have a competency.
Yeah, totally agree.
My second one is to start small. It has less risk and allows you to gain confidence. What I mean by that, let's put it into a sales situation. Don't call the chief executive officer at General Mills on your first phone call, right? Don't make your first appointment with the highest person at the company. Get through a few appointments with lower level people, get some practice in, find out what you're good at, what you need to learn, and then you can start working up that list. But if you're new to something, don't start with your, most important contact to make a phone call because you're not good enough yet. Start, I don't mean start with a janitor, but, start with somebody a little bit lower down the road so you don't mess up the whole account on your first phone call.
True.
I think when I talk about overthinking things, don't think. Don't think so much. Act. I had a speaker I heard once. He says when he's got to make phone calls, he says charge, charge, and then he gets himself fired up. Some people like to make phone calls standing up rather than sitting down because they have more energy. So when you have to make those phone calls, you set that a time at 9 o'clock, and you have your list there. Don't make your list when you're supposed to be making phone calls.
Right.
Everything's ready, and you grab that phone at 9 o'clock and you start dialing and see what happens. And your first 3 phone calls will suck, and then you'll get better at it. So don't think, act.
Yeah.
My fourth one is have a coach or mentor to lean on. If you're out there by yourself, you don't even know when you make a mistake. You need somebody sitting by you as you're making some of those early phone calls to encourage you, to help you say, maybe if you said it this way, a little different, it would be more effective. So have somebody that's coaching you. And that's what Scott and I do. So if you don't feel that you're good at something in sales, give us a call. We'll talk you through it. Be consistent in your practice every day. You're going to get better at making phone calls. You can get better at appointments the more you do it. I'll tell you what, you make 100 phone calls, you're better.
Right.
You have 50 appointments, you're better. You sit in your office and think about it, you're no better. You're more fearful.
Mm-hmm.
So start doing something. They say action cures fear.
Right.
So doing something gets you into the motion of it. And then I think the last one is more cerebral, and that's when you want to think about what's the worst that can happen. They're going to tell me no and hang up. That's the worst that can happen. They're going to say, I'm not interested in your ketchup. Okay, I can deal with that. Let's move forward with it. They're not going to come and beat me up. They're not going to throw me out of their office. If they set an appointment with me, even if it doesn't go well, I've never found, I think in 40 years of selling, I can count on one hand the number of rude people I had to deal with. They just don't give you the appointment if they're rude.
Right.
So the worst that can happen, usually you can deal with it. I think those are the things that I say. Practice, start small, get into action, have a coach or mentor, be consistent in your practice and your performance every day, and then know what the worst that can happen and realize you can deal with it.
Right. And nobody died making phone calls.
That's right.
I mean, you think about what is the worst thing that could ever happen. Annihilation is the worst thing that could ever happen. And nobody died.
Fired.
Getting
fired and having no sales is the worst thing that can happen than taking a couple of no's. So
yeah. I got that out of the book. The guide Call Reluctance or something like that. Is what's the worst thing that could happen? Annihilation. Nobody ever died making phone calls.
That's right.
I assure you. But great stuff, Bill. And I've taken a little bit different approach on mine. And I'm sharing information that came out of the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. And I read this book many, many years ago, and it was an inspirational book. It's also a cerebral book, as Bill said. When you think about it, what's the worst thing that could happen? And Susan breaks things down into a couple of different levels. So I'll share the first level of fears is things that happen to you. And then there's also things that require action. So there's two different areas on first level fears, as she says it. So that things that happen to you are like aging, being alone, and prospects calling you. I added that one to the list. Those that require action are like going back to school, changing careers, or you calling prospects. So when we think about first level fears, those are pretty simple fears. Some of them we can control and some of them we can't. And then she gets into second level fears. So the things that happen to you include rejection, success, or failure, because sometimes it's the same fear. And then being vulnerable is also a fear of those that happen to you. Those that require action.
What's the importance of level 1 or level 2 fears? What does that mean?
It's the greater the fear, the higher the level.
Okay. So it's like a degree of fear.
Yeah.
All right.
And getting into the things that require action on level 2 fears include being conned, losing control. That's a fear. Disapproval of doing something and getting rejected, and a loss of image or kind of a kink in your reputation or your character. That gets into a little bit higher degree of fear that people struggle with, and those things that that require action. And
so could a fear for me, like being alone, be a level 2 fear for me and a level 1 fear for you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It could be different times of our life. And I think when we think about dying, I think the younger we are, it's not as much of a factor. The older we get, I think we're probably more at peace and we're not as afraid of it either. And I think one of the things that the author really talks about is that when we really study fear and we think about what is the worst thing that could happen, like you mentioned earlier, and to really look at it is to getting information. And if I knew, and here's out of the book, she says, if you knew you could handle anything that came your way, what would you possibly have to fear? So it's about knowing and accepting the outcomes of the worst case scenario. If you're at A and you want to get to B, and C is the worst case scenario, and you can accept C, then B is worth going for. If you don't go for B, then you're going to be living A over and over and over again in your day. And if you go from A to C, well, then C becomes your new A, and you make another decision, take another risk, deal with the fear, and you get to hopefully B next time, or maybe another C. Another thing that the author shares is all you must do to diminish your fears is to develop more trust in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Period. Have confidence in your skills. So like Bill said, to be prepared and to be able to practice. And the more information that you have, the more confident you are in your abilities, the more preparation is, the separation is in the preparation, the easier it's going to be to overcome fear. And if we look at how we hold fear, there's really two areas. It's pain and there's power. So if we, again, go through kind of a process of, if we follow the path of pain, then it goes to helplessness, then depression, and then we're paralyzed. I mean, it's paralysis.
Yeah.
And that's the pain part of fear. The power part of fear.
Well, that's why I think if you think too long about something,
right,
you go through these feelings instead of getting into action,
right,
which I think is going to be your power choice here. And I don't mean to take that away from you, but the more I think about it, actually, the more paralyzed I become. The more I get into action, the more I find out, as you said, it doesn't have a hold on me.
Yeah. I think procrastination is fear.
Yep.
And I think we deal with procrastination in that we're fearful of taking the next step. So we procrastinate, and we feel that our next step is not perfect, so we don't execute on it.
Anything that we hold on to gets worse.
Yeah.
Right. If I've got a crappy job that I have to do, a call I have to make, something I have to do on my computer, which I usually hate to do, right? The longer I hold on to that, the worse it gets. One of the things I advise people to do as a time management tool is to do the crappy jobs first.
Right.
The ones that you let sit there, it's sitting on your list and it's preying on your mind the whole day, and you do it at 4:00 and your whole day still sucked. Whereas if you did it at 8:30, it'd have been cleared off your mind, cleared out of this fear that we're holding on to that you're talking about, and we can move on, and our day is much brighter because we got rid of that thing early. So I think that's one of the action choices you can take, is to get rid of something early. If it's phone calling and you hate to do it, and truthfully, I still don't enjoy it after 40 years of doing it, but I do those things early, and then I feel the rest of my day, I can power through.
Right. No, that's a good prioritization. I think that's titled like "Eat the Frog" type of method, is you get the stuff that you hate the most over. I don't
want to eat a frog.
No, I know. That's a little graphic. So the other part of pain is power, and you get into a choice. You make a choice, which then add energy to that, and now you have action. And when you really power through your fear and you commit to action, you're dealing with procrastination, you're dealing with inaction, which is not going to get you any different result than it did yesterday. If you don't do it today, then tomorrow's going to be the same as yesterday. So you really commit to the action, and you end up adding, the fear gives you more power and more of a challenge in order to overcome that. And the last thing that I really took away from the author's book is the pain to power vocabulary. So the pain statement says, I can't. The power statement says, I won't. That's a choice. That's a different position. The pain says, I should. The power says, I could, meaning I have the possibilities of doing it versus the limitations. The pain part says, it's not my fault. The power part says, I'm totally responsible. And lastly, the pain says, I hope, and the power position says, I know. And that's a big difference when it comes to salespeople. I talk with many salespeople that hope things improve and hope they learn more. Well, I'm sorry, but do you commit to learning more, or do you say, I could learn more, or I should learn more?
Right.
And I could learn more says, I'm going to do it. I should learn more says, well, I'm hoping something changes, but I'm not going to commit to it.
Accomplishing something and knowing that you were capable is probably the number one way that you can overcome fear.
Yeah.
Understanding that you have capabilities in yourself to do things that are difficult. That's the way they'll grow up.
Yeah. And they can take ownership of that. And then that's transferable into other projects. I did it here. I can do it here. And growing and being able to expand those experiences. There's experiences, and then there's education. And like Bill said earlier, the experiences carry so much weight when you go through and you do it. It's an interaction that you have with a challenge and a solution and an outcome. Education is theory, and you can all play it out in your mind going, well, this should really work in real life, but we'll never know because we'll never experienced it.
So let's talk about resources that we have. Scott, you want to talk about the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and you'll have a link to that on.
I will. Yep.
All right, on Amazon. And I am going to offer to do a presentation for your group, your team, your organization, whatever that is. And that is finding your spark of courage. How do we create courage? Some of the same things I talked about will be here. I'll expand on those. It's about a 40-minute presentation. I can do it in person if you're in the Twin Cities. Otherwise, I can do it via Zoom or Team or whatever your process is. But I'd love to offer 3 of those in the next few weeks for your sales team or organization. Finding your spark of courage.
Great offer. Great offer. Our golden nugget today is nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. And this is by Marie Curie, who, if you look Marie Curie up, you'll find that she is the first woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. And then later, her husband won a Nobel Peace Prize, and they are the only married couple ever to win a Nobel Peace Prize. So I thought
and she discovered, I think, radium. She worked with radiology, and she died of radiation poisoning.
Oh, I bet you were working that close to it.
They didn't understand it. They didn't know what it could do to them. Well, I think that's a great quote. If fear was only logical, but fear isn't logical. It is totally emotional. And there's things that I had kind of a small fear of when I was younger, and I have a much larger fear of them now. So I think you got to deal with the emotional part of it as well.
True.
Go to winningatselling.com. You'll have all the information there. Look for our show notes. And the next book, of course, is The Success Principles by Jack Canfield.
Our next week's topic is going to be on the power of beliefs, and the chapter 10 on the sales jujitsu.
Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.